Do you think these remote workers will care that maybe they are no longer eligible for a promotion if they can continue to work from home, which is what they prefer?
Well, each employee has different priorities. There's times in my life where I wouldn't have cared if I wasn't eligible for a promotion because I valued working from home. But the people that are going to be negatively affected the most because of this policy are women who are disproportionately affected by childcare expenses and childcare duties, and also people with disabilities. If you have an anxiety disorder and it's hard for you to go into the office, now you're not going to be able to do that without a job advancement opportunity. That's very hard. So this is not going to affect everyone. Working from home was the great equalizer, and unfortunately, they're backing out of that policy for reasons unknown to me.
Welcome back to the Future of Work Weekly Report, where we unpack the chaos behind the headlines, question the leadership logic of the week, and occasionally get uncomfortably real about the systems we're all navigating. This week's episode, it's about something we don't talk about enough: how the return to office movement is quietly, consistently, and systematically failing women, especially working moms. So, if you've ever been wondering why the pipeline to leadership feels thinner, why promotion gaps keep showing up, or why hybrid work is under attack, this one's for you. Let's start with something infuriating. According to Fortune, Upwork's chief people officer revealed that fully remote men are twice as likely to be promoted as fully remote women. Twice. That's not a small gap. That's a canyon. It's part of a larger trend some are calling the flexibility stigma. The idea that if you take advantage of flexibility, you're less committed. But here's the catch. Who's most likely to need flexibility? Women.
Basically, going back to the office for women and really for anyone is just now this giant financial burden that we all got a little too comfortable not having over the last couple of years.
The pressure and the cost of going, the financial cost of going back to the office for women is greater than we think. So there's the cost of the clothes, there's the pink tax of the grooming that is so much more expensive. There's the pink tax of the higher dry cleaning for women's clothes. There are all sorts of pink taxes which cost us more than they do men. At the same time that we're dealing with inflation, which impacts us more.
We're thinking about childcare. What is it going to physically cost then, and also economically cost us to kind of rearrange our families because we have to go back to the office? Childcare is extremely expensive, only getting more expensive. It's getting used to this new normal. There is going to be a period of mistakes, of busting your budget, of not understanding how things go. There's going to be a period of maybe several weeks, maybe several months. So my advice is to understand that that's coming, that's going to happen. Give yourself, preload yourself with financial grace, preload yourself with financial empathy.
And that brings us to the not so fun economics of parenting. According to the Institute for Women's Policy Research, each child under 5 reduces a mother's earnings by 15%. And no, that's not counting the cost of childcare, which in cities like New York City can run up to $20,000 a year. So when companies force employees back to the office with no regard for the realities of caregiving, it's not just inconvenient, it's exclusionary.
In this case, the or else means missing out on promotions. In a memo released to Business Insider, the company says starting this quarter, quote, career advancement, including applying to new roles in the company, will require a team member to reclassify as a hybrid on site. So I'm joined now by Jessica Kriegel, the Chief Scientist of Workplace Culture at Culture Partners. Jessica, thank you so much for your time. First of all, how is Dell likely defining hybrid worker at this point?
A hybrid worker is someone who is coming into the office at least on average 3 times per week. And that means that they need to be living next to a Dell office. There's internal confusion, according to reports, on which Dell offices are even eligible for that hybrid work. There's a lot of internal strife right now as people try and work their way through understanding this new policy, which is coming out of nowhere for employees.
Exactly. And it's coming, this is really a major reversal from the same company that at one point had been very supportive of remote work. Why do you think we're seeing this reversal?
There are many CEOs that think that creating a sense of belonging and productivity in the workplace means that you have to be in the office, but Michael Dell is not one of those CEOs. In September of 2022, he posted on LinkedIn that if you are leaning on forced hours, which was his term for forcing people back in the office to create belonging and productivity, you're doing it wrong, he said. So he also said they found no meaningful difference in people who work from home than people who worked in the office. And they've been working from home for long before the pandemic. So what happened in the last 18 months to get him to change his mind? I can tell you, I'm not going to speculate on what the executives are saying, but I can tell you that they did spend over $700 million in severance last year. They had 2 rounds of layoffs. That's expensive. And some employees feel that this may be a stealth layoff, a way to get people to leave without having to lay them off.
And there are a lot of workers, particularly younger workers, who are kind of introduced to the workforce remotely because of the pandemic. Do you think these remote workers will care that maybe they are no longer eligible for a promotion if they can continue to work from home, which is what they prefer?
Well, each employee has different priorities. There's times in my life where I wouldn't have cared if I wasn't eligible for a promotion because I valued working from home. But the people that are going to be negatively affected the most because of this policy are women who are disproportionately affected by childcare expenses and childcare duties, and also people with disabilities. If you have an anxiety disorder and it's hard for you to go into the office, now you're not going to be able to do that without a job advancement opportunity. That's very hard. So this is not going to affect everyone. Working from home was the great equalizer, and unfortunately, they're backing out of that policy for reasons unknown to me.
Yeah, you really do bring up some very good points there on who will be most impacted.
A 2024 Fortune and Upwork survey found that 63% of companies with RTO mandates reported losing a disproportionate number of women. And not just entry-level roles, senior level, high potential, future CEO level women. That's not just a leaky pipeline, that's a bursted pipe, and no one's calling the plumber. RTO is being sold as a strategy to restore culture or increase collaboration. But in practice, it's often about visibility. Who's seen? Who's in the room? Who's at the after lunch debrief? And if you're not there physically, you're often not there at all.
Well, the push by employers to bring workers back into the office may be having a reverse effect. A new survey finds some hybrid workers would rather leave their jobs and give up flexible schedules. That's especially true on Wall Street, where a recent survey found 1 in 2 professional investors were willing to quit their jobs if their managers required them to spend more time in the office. The trend is having an impact on hiring practices, company growth, and more. Joining us now is Bloomberg reporter Jo Constance. She is the co-author of a recent article on the subject in Bloomberg News. So, Jo, tell us, how has company growth been impacted overall by the fact that many workers would prefer to work remotely or at least have a hybrid schedule?
Right. So we have new data out just this week that looked at how recruitment was impacted by the number of days in the office companies are requiring. And it's showing that companies that require more days in the office are growing at a slower rate, especially those companies that require 5 days in the office. And so that is just some preliminary evidence to show that again, workers really value their flexibility that they got during the pandemic, and that's just continuing.
Now, there's also been a lot of debate about productivity in terms of allowing remote work, hybrid work. A lot of companies think that there's a lack of productivity. Other employees say, I actually get more done when I'm able to have a hybrid schedule. What is actually the truth about that?
Yeah, that's a really tough one, especially because, again, there's those perception differences. The people who are working remotely really say that they do feel more productive. And then the perception is different from management, and it's hard to square those two things. But I think what we're seeing is even if somebody is just as productive at home as they would be in the office, and maybe even a little bit more because there aren't as many distractions that you might have in an open floor plan. You might be losing other things like the connections with your colleagues. You might have really strong connections with your team members who you're talking to and working with every day, but you may not have as many weak ties with other people at the company. So, there are potentially other things that are lost, and we're just learning more about that, as we go along.
So, Joe, given that your research or your reporting finds that companies that are requiring full-time in-office work are growing slower, they're finding it more difficult to recruit people, what can employers do to try and compete if they want their workers to be in the office?
Yeah, I think the idea there is really just look very carefully at how many days you really need, because again, I think for a lot of people, a lot of employees appreciate the fact that it's important to have some in-person time. So, a lot of people would say, yeah, sure, I'm happy to come in 2 days, 3 days. But I think the question there is, do we really need everyone in 5 days a week? And if that's the case, then I think it's up to senior leadership to be very clear about exactly why that is. I think people really appreciate just knowing the logic and understanding that, and if they can get on board with that and understand how, why it's necessary for the business, I think a lot of people can appreciate that.
All right, Joe Constance, thank you.
As of 2023, 73.7% of mothers with kids under 18 were in the labor force. Compare that to 94.9% of fathers. And no, it's not just because of a personal choice. The flexibility gap, the caregiving gap, and the cultural expectations gap are all part of the equation. When companies don't adapt, women leave. Not because they want to, but because the structure makes it impossible to stay.
Nick Bloom and Adam Grant both shared out a study yesterday that showed that if you give people the ability to work where they're most effective, to work from home or work from the office, when they're doing their individual work, you get a 12% boost in productivity. So kind of hard to ignore that one. On top of that, Joanne was talking about the mandates, like pushing people back even further. Besides the fact that it doesn't boost financial performance, it actually degrades employee engagement. And there's mounting evidence now that it does actually cause people to leave. And the people that are most likely to leave are people who've been there the longest, that have tenure, people who have been recently promoted because they have marketable skills, right? They're the ones that can find a job even in a tougher economy.
If it's
and the
tenure,
third one is women. There was a study that came out.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
There's a study that came out from Upwork just in July where they polled about 1,000 different C-level executives that had done mandates. 2/3 of them said that it disproportionately caused women to quit over men, and that they couldn't replace those people fast enough, and there was a knock-on effect on their productivity.
Here's the part that stings. 90% of women say hybrid work has helped level the playing field. It allows for caregiving, for autonomy, for better mental health. It's not perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than the old model. And now we're watching it get eroded. Mandate by mandate, badge swipe by badge swipe. Hybrid work didn't just help women survive the pandemic workplace, it helped them thrive. And rolling it back isn't just a business decision. It's a culture war waged quietly but effectively against progress. So what's the takeaway? If your company is bragging about culture while losing high-performing women, if leadership says they support families but keep dialing up badge monitoring software, if remote men are getting promoted while remote women are invisible, then we don't have a location problem. We have a leadership problem. We have a culture problem. And until companies start acknowledging the gendered impact of their policies, the future of work won't be inclusive. It'll just be another system built on exclusion. That's it for this week's Future of Work Weekly Report. Send this to someone who needs to hear it, especially if they're in charge. We'll be back next week with more insights, fewer excuses, and hopefully fewer RTO mandates.